Starting recording.
All right. Hello. We are
Hello.
recording. You've disappeared, by the way. Oh no, there you are. There you are.
Hello.
Right.
If you're watching this, you probably know who we are. I'm Patrick Stewart. This is Dave McGrogan. I'm interviewing David about Nu-Yoon-Suin, the remastered Nu-Yoon-Suin Kickstarter, which should still be on if you're watching this. David, introduce yourself to our audience of 15 people by telling them something they don't know about you.
Ooh. You blindsided me with that one. Well, I need to introduce myself. So my name's David McGrogan, or Noisms. Okay, here's something they don't know about me. I have about 5 other blogs.
What?
That are
What? Active blogs are all the ones you don't update.
yeah, semi-active, but they are not advertised. I don't tell anybody what they are, and barely anybody reads them, but they are occasionally updated.
Ooh, this now I'm going to start looking for those now. I'm going through your page trying to find them. And do these blogs reference each other, or is each of them a separate thing on its own?
Separate things. Yeah, I think they're only read by like Russian spam bots and things. I don't think anyone actually looks at them, but they're for me to. Well, actually, no, I'm not going to say. Well, I'm just going to be like a man of mystery.
Okay, so we're here mainly because you are doing a Kickstarter for Nu-Yoon-Suin. This is, if anyone's watching, back in the brass age of the OSR when there was lots of new content coming out.
Yeah.
A bunch of like notable books came out, and some of those were very highly produced. Some of them were just basically print on demand, and there's been a resurgence or a growth or a theme of old books being redone with higher quality, more play testing, and nicer art, etc., etc. David, Nu-Yoon-Suin's been around for a while. How long has it been around?
I was just thinking about this. I'm pretty sure it was early 2015.
All right.
Late 2014, early 2015.
So it's been like about 8 years.
8 years, yeah. But the real issue is that it used to be on Lulu, and it was print on demand on Lulu, obviously. And I think it was during the pandemic. I don't know why the reason was, but Lulu basically just emailed me one day and said we're not producing the book anymore because the format. I don't know. It's like it's not doing anything for us, kind of thing. I don't know why they wanted to change their printers or something, and they wouldn't print the book anymore, basically. So it's been unavailable in print. So I'd always resisted doing a second version of it because I sort of didn't want to get. I didn't want to become just like the Nu-Yoon-Suin guy. But it seemed like I didn't want it not to be in print. But that was a good opportunity to actually like revamp it and do new things.
So it's famously in a unique landscape format. I think I've got
yeah.
If anyone wants to take a look,
and it will be broadly the same format.
It will still be a wide book.
Yes, because people periodically would criticize it and say that you should release the next version in like a A4 or whatever. I'm going to deliberately do it in that format again.
So.
just to interfere with people's tidy bookshelves.
A long time ago, when I released a book, someone was really angry about it, and they said they put it on the shelf and it didn't look the same next to other books by me because it was too. And ever since then, every single book I've produced has had the False Machine logo slightly askew in a different direction. So purely so that guy can't put them on the shelf, and they'll always look slightly jumbled.
Yeah. Petty spice.
Just
this is one of the few things that's one of the few pleasures that we get out of life is petty spice.
Okay.
It's underappreciated.
David, it's time to do capitalism. What is new in Nu-Yoon-Suin? I've written that in capitals, so it must be important.
What is new in it? Okay, well, all right, it's got new monsters. So I'll go through sequentially.
Okay.
Well, okay. First thing is it's going to actually be proofread.
What?
So the typos will be gone. And laid out properly, not just me on MS Word kicking around. It's got new monsters. I think there's probably about. I should know the number actually, shouldn't I? There's a fair good portion of new monsters in the bestiary. It's got proper random encounter tables for all the different regions, which weren't in the original. It's got the main thing is 12 completely playable adventure sites that are sort of doable right outside the book. You should be able to run them just straight as they are. And I reckon you could get like a good few sessions out of each one of them. Some are bigger than others. Some might be one session, some might be even like, I would say 4 or 5 sessions. It sort of depends, but you could, there's like decent playable stuff in there.
And are these emblematic or like suggestive of these particular areas where they are? I think you have one
exactly.
each section.
There's kind of 3 for each of the kind of broad areas. So there's 3 in the Yellow City and the Topaz Islands. There's 3 for the 100 Kingdoms, 3 for the Mountains of the Moon, 3 for Lamarak. No, that would be included in 100 Kingdoms, actually, sorry. And 3 for, that's right, 3 for like Drukiel area. So they're kind of like for the different geographical areas, but you could easily like reskin them for the other ones. You could easily do that. And you could easily just like kind of pick stuff out from them to use in your own stuff. So yeah, they're kind of like designed to sort of, you could drop them into like a hex map as places to explore, or you could run them as like short campaigns or one shots, or you could just like fillet them for your own pleasure. And there's also new appendices. There's rules on like antiquarians in the Yellow City, so you can like randomly generate antiquarians who might buy like rare items and stuff. And there's like a treasure table chart as well, so you can generate treasure without having to have the rules cyclopedia. So you should be
basing everything around the rules cyclopedia, basically. So it's almost like a companion to that. Because that seems to be your favorite.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Yeah, only because I'm very old now, and like I just want to know what I know. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to learn new things now, Patrick. I've become set in my ways. I'm like Stumpy in Rio Bravo. I just want to sit there with my shotgun.
That's an ancient reference as well, even for you. No, that film came out like about 30 years before you were born.
I just want to sit there and drink whiskey in my prison, guarding the prisoners with my shotgun. I don't want to get involved in like newfangled rule sets. Yeah.
But it is broadly translatable between whatever the melange of OSR rule set says.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how you feel about this, but like, isn't it all completely interchangeable? Like this, I don't really buy the need for different systems. I mean, I don't want to criticize anyone who comes up with a new system because they obviously have legitimate reasons for doing it, but I sort of feel like it's all kind of, whether it's Labyrinth Lord or OSE or BX or whatever it is, it's kind of like a hit dice is a hit dice. Armor class is armor class.
I think all of those are broadly interchangeable, but I think it gets less so as you get into like 4E and 5E.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's true. Yeah.
Any corporately owned rule set has this kind of natural evolution towards the illusion of accessibility, where it's easy to get into and it's like theoretically, but then the desire to milk the consumer for as much as possible. So it starts off seemingly easy, but you can't really play it well unless it gets really complicated, and it always gets just complicated enough that you really need to buy an app or some other thing so you can play it the way it's meant to be played and really get the most out of the system. And I think any corporation owns will eventually end up at that zone of like just a bit of a nightmare to run, but theoretically.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Do you think, I don't know if this is something that you would want to do, but I feel like you would be the person who's best placed to do it, possibly in the whole world, possibly the person best placed alive.
I can't wait to hear what you're about to say.
Well, comparing the evolution of Warhammer and the evolution of D&D, and kind of like the way they go through different editions, because there is something similar going on, isn't there, between the two of them? Like they're both like 95% of the market in their particular hobby, aren't they? Like there are other
money, but I don't think D&D makes any money. Like it's not that hard Warhammer to make money because it's like
it's like a
plastic into more molds. That makes a fair amount of profit, but the only thing that makes a shitload of profit for D&D is like splat books and stuff.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to tax streaming, which I think they almost virtually tried to do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There's no manufactured product you can grind out like with Magic cards. It's always been a nightmare for any company to make a profit out of D&D.
That's true, yeah. But there's sort of like a similar there's a similar incentive, isn't there, to kind of like revamp things occasionally, because
definitely have Convergent Evolution and a kind of a similar weird relationship with their fan base.
Yeah.
And the mixture of corporate ownership and its conflicts and interaction with a kind of more of a folk movement scene.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of like, yeah, they're both, I think I guess what I'm getting at is probably less so with Warhammer, but I think still the case. If you had the rules, like the original core rules, and you've got a number of models, you basically don't need anything else. And the same is true of D&D, isn't it? Like, you only need really the core rule books. So both of them have got a limited shelf life in that respect. So they have this incentive to kind of almost, what's the word, metasmasize, and they into kind of like bigger things. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. If you want to buy shares in something, by the way, here's a like hot share tip. I bet you weren't expecting this from this interview. Games Workshop is so profitable. The dividends that you get are just like ridiculous. Even if you just got like one share, you get like just regular, like it's worth spending the money to get Games Workshop shares, basically.
Well, if I have 95 shares, I'll consider it. But I want to see how they respond to 3D printing. Also, Games Workshop is kind of like my abusive boyfriend, who I'm still interested in what they're up to, but I kind of want to see them fail. I have mixed feelings about it.
I think that means you're the abusive boyfriend to Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Yeah. I liked. Yeah, I did. I've still got so much affection for Games Workshop though, because it was such a big part of my life in like my teenage years. You know, my sort of between probably the age of about 12 and 15. It was such a big, like I spent most of my time like playing Warhammer or Warhammer 40k or Necromunda or Blood Bowl or whatever. So I've still got a lot of affection for them, even though I can't bring myself to go into a Games Workshop shop anymore. Especially now that it's called Warhammer. I don't know. I sort of I know I'd get sucked in and end up like losing all my money, spending sums. Yeah, but also the people in there, like I don't know. Yeah, you get like the hard sell, don't you?
You every time, yeah. There's a ritual to it. I'm going to ask you some more questions about Nu-Yoon-Suin because technically,
okay. Yeah. Let's not talk. Yeah.
What new artists do you have, and how much of a nightmare have they caused for you? Because anyone who produces books for the OSR knows you need art, but artists are all mental. So every time you deal with an artist or anyone other than yourself, there's an exciting range. It's like a dungeon in itself, as a labyrinth of exciting opportunities and possibilities.
That's
so
true,
without naming any particular artist, what's your craziest artist story?
All right. Well, there's actually okay. Well, actually, it's a positive story, really.
Okay.
And it's about Matt Adams. So when Matt sort of announced to me that he wanted to do everything using MS Paint, it was all going to be like pixel art. Like, I won't lie that my immediate reaction was, I can't imagine that looking. Well, I can imagine it looking good for certain things, but not for Nu-Yoon-Suin. Like, it just felt like completely the other end of the spectrum from like what you would think of if you're thinking of like Nu-Yoon-Suin art, right? You'd think like kind of like
or like pen and ink.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I was really unconvinced, but I said to him, just send me some bits and pieces. And he did. And yeah, what can I say? They're really good, aren't they? Yeah, like that cover, the new cover, is just like, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sort of speak extemporaneously, go out on a limb, but I think that that's my favorite RPG book cover ever. I think that's like, you can't get better than that for what I want.
Kickstarter?
Hey?
Is that on the Kickstarter? People want to go.
That's the main image on the Kickstarter.
Right. Okay.
Like, it's just like, there's no RPG book in the world that looks anything like that, and that's like the number one on the list for me in terms of like, yeah, what do you want? Like, what do I want in a new Nu-Yoon-Suin edition? It's like, yeah, ticks all the boxes, and the interior art's amazing as well. They look like so, they look so good. It's just like, yeah, this is perfect. it's perfect for the look of what I want, but also it's just, well, no, let me rephrase that. It's perfect for a look that I never thought that I wanted, but like I definitely, now that I've seen it, it's like, yeah, wow, that's really good. But also perfect in the sense that, yeah, it doesn't look like anything else. It's just totally distinctive. I'm really sick of like, well, I don't want to sort of criticize anybody, so I'm not going to single anybody out, but I think people will know what I mean when I say there's a certain look that a lot of OSR books have, and a lot of RPG books have in general. And there's nothing wrong with it in itself, but it becomes like slightly repetitive if you see it too often. And I think there's also a lot of RPG art which understandably is very derivative. Like it looks a lot like John Blanche drew it, or Russ Nicholson drew it, or something. Do you know what I mean? Like it's very obvious, or Errol Otis drew it. It's obviously like inflected by one particular artist's work. But Matt's like totally isn't.
True.
Does that make sense to you? I mean, Scrap Princess is like that too, isn't she? Like that's just like totally. There's no one else doing something like that. So that's like what you want, I think, or that's what I want anyway. It has to look good, but also just like totally distinctive.
And who else do you have on there, art-wise?
Tom Fitzgerald, who's the same actually. You would say the same of him. Like Tom Fitzgerald, like he's the Middenmerk Tom, who of G Plus fame back in the day. He's like in himself, he's like a kind of product of the golden age of the OSR.
He might update again one day. Straits of an Ain just updated after like, or an Iron updated after like 9 years or something.
Yeah.
It could happen.
He might do. But he's like one of those sort of like titans who people speak about. You know, like people talk about well, in Britain we could talk about like ancient footballers from like the 1920s, like Dixie Dean and stuff. Or like or Americans.
No, but you probably would.
Or Americans might talk about like Babe Ruth or something. It's like no one alive has actually seen them, but like yet we inherit this idea that they're these like legends. That's what Tom Fitzgerald's like.
So in the OSR, like 10 years is basically like 40 years in real life.
Everything's like compressed. It's like internet time, isn't it? 10 years is like the Ice Age. Yeah, it's like that Valley of the Blue Snails blog, or Scott Driver.
Huge Ruin something?
Huge Ruin Scott, yeah. Huge Ruin Pile, yeah. There are certain figures from those days who are spoken of only in awe now. And Tom is one of them.
At least to one of these questions, are you now an ancient creature of the scene?
Was that actually your next question?
It wasn't the next one, but it was on the list.
It's one of them. Okay. I suppose I am, aren't I? I suppose I am. I'm even more ancient than you. I'm more ancient than you are.
I know. All right, you don't need to lay it on.
When was your so my first I was actually talking about this in the interview that I gave to Nathan. You can also find it on my blog. I'm sure like everyone who's heard that will also hear this. But yeah, I'm almost coming up to 2,000 entries, so I think I'm tempted, to do like a retrospective, basically copying you, but not. I'm not going to do every entry though, like sort of like edited high, like the best 200 entries or something like that.
It's free content.
I'm tempted.
You think it's free, and it turns out to be a nightmare to actually produce.
Yeah. No, I actually tried when it must have been the 1,000th entry, or maybe 10 years. There was a previous anniversary anyway, and I sat down and I sort of went through and did a short list of all the entries that I thought, okay, I'll start with these and whittle them down. And just the task of doing that and reading them all, it was just, I couldn't do it. It was just like, it was too much of a time drain. So trying to do 2,000 and edit them down, well, not edit them down, you know what I mean? Whittle them down. It's a big task.
It is.
But it would be quite nice to have. It would be quite nice to exist, I think. Even just like as a print-on-demand book.
Will Noisms games ever have a multi-issue series? Or is it all just going to be the first in a long-running series of whatever, and then you can produce another one?
Yeah, I'm just going to do that, yeah. I'm just going to have like volume 1 of issue 1 of. But it's funny that you should mention that, actually, because my mum always used to joke to me about that. that like when I was young, I really wanted to be an author. You know, I really had like that was my aim. Like I wanted to be a writer.
And that's how you start writing. You write chapter 1 on something really big.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
Yeah,
kind of do half a page.
Exactly. And so she would like joke with me that like she would go into my room to like tidy it or whatever when I was like 12 or whatever. And there'd be like these massive piles of paper, and she would look through them all. It'd all be like chapter 1, 11 paragraphs. And then...
Even better, you can be like chapter 1, book 1, the cycle of Gauguin, beginnings.
Yeah,
it's half
exactly.
page.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I wish she used to say like you could put them all together, and like eventually you'd have like a whole book just made out of like here's chapter 1s. But later on, I thought like is quite a kind of a cool concept for a book. I think just like a book of beginnings, like it must exist, but like a book of like 200 opening pages to novels. Do you know what I mean? So each one is just here's the opening page, and you can imagine for yourself the rest of it.
Done that, but you could definitely do a kind of a metatextual, like an artist going in saying, "Oh, history of someone's life as they continuously try to write a novel."
Yeah. Well, that's in The Plague, isn't it? Have you read The Plague? You know, Camus.
I have, but it's so long ago, I've forgotten much of it.
Yeah, there's a character in that who's trying to write a novel, and basically the whole of The Plague, he's just rewriting the opening sentence in different forms. So like periodically it'll come back to him and he'll have like reworked it into something else. And that's as far as he ever gets.
I think there's a Red Dwarf gag about a guy. It's rumored he's planning to revise for an exam, so he starts to do like a perfectly created revision schedule. It takes so long making it that he's like lost a day, so then he has to reschedule. But then the time it takes to make the schedule and the schedule. It's Tristram Shandy, isn't it? That's already exists, where it's Spain trying to start a story, but he goes on for like 400 pages of assignment.
Yeah, I've never read that one. I've never read it.
I only got halfway through because it's long.
Yeah.
And it's
have you read?
But still like goes on for too long.
Yeah. Have you read? You'd really like it. That Spanish one. What's it called? I know you don't like people recommending books to you, but maybe the readers can appreciate it. You'd like it. It's called The Manuscript Found at Saragossa. The Manuscript Found at Saragossa. It's like, so basically it's a guy, so it's got like a framing story, a guy who's lost on the way to somewhere in Spain. He's like traveling through Spain in Extremadura, and he comes to an inn, and he gets talking to somebody who tells him a story, and in that story there's a character who tells another character a story.
Oh no.
That story, there's a character who tells a character a story, and it's kind of like all these nested stories all together. It's really, really good. And the guy who wrote it became convinced he was a werewolf and shot himself after he wrote it. But added sort of like interest. Yeah. I can't remember his name now, but he was Polish. I can't remember his name now, but yeah, it's really good though. You'd like it. Yeah, I do recommend it.
Speaking of your writing, will you ever read your daughters The Spear of Eternity? If you don't, for people who don't know, could you explain to the viewer what the Spear of Eternity is?
Yeah, the Spear of Eternity. Speaking of like wanting to be a novelist, the Spear of Eternity. Actually, it's probably the longest thing I ever wrote. It was so I'll describe the scene to you. So a friend of mine, I had a friend, one friend, in school who, one day, like the teacher said, we're going to do creative writing today, class. So I want you to write a story. This would have been in primary school. So when we were about 9 or 10. And it's got to be like 4 pages long. But me and my friend had been reading The Lord of the Rings. And so we started writing, and obviously, we wanted to like ape The Lord of the Rings, and we kind of got it 4 pages in, and like we barely like finished describing like the opening scene.
And poor teacher had no idea who she was fucking with, and she said, "It's great, right?" It's like, game on, motherfucker.
Yeah, so we were like, that's what we were like. We were like, right, okay, this is just like kid stuff. We're like proper grown-up writers. So that night we went home. Like, I think we went to my house, and we were in like my bedroom, like secreted away. and we started writing like in earnest. We got like exercise books and started writing like novels, and we got together like every day probably for a couple of months, I think, and wrote together. So he's got one as well. I can't even remember what his was called or what it was about, but probably very similar. Probably something involving the defeat of the Dark Lord. And yeah, so it's the story of the Spear of Eternity. It's got 4 parts, and you have to adventure through the continent to get all the 4 parts together. And you then attach them together, and you go and stab it into the heart of the Dark Lord, and that's how you kill him. Yeah, and I did write a blog entry about it ages ago. I'm going to look it up actually, because the name of the continent is going to annoy me because I can't quite remember it. But where is it? Yeah, there it is. Spear of Eternity. Yeah, that's right. The continent of Snith. That's what I called it. And the Dark Lord was called Keshin.
Oh, nice. Hey, but are you going to read it to your daughters when they're at the same age?
No, I think. Well, my eldest daughter, already like writes novels. She's like writing these sort of like, I mean, they're not very long, but like, she kind of like staples together these like. She's 5. She sort of like staples together these like notepads and like draws pictures on them and stuff. And it's like these big long extended novels, which are mostly about fairies, and their primary activity is like getting changed into different outfits. So it's like, it's like, you know, these fairies, and like today they decided that they were going to go on a picnic, and they put on picnic outfits. And then they decided to go swimming, so they put on swimming costumes, and then they did this, and they put on these costumes. So it's like that for like 20 pages with pictures. So I'm not sure she'd be interested in like dwarves getting their heads clubbed with like morning stars, or or chaos mutants. Here we go, chaos mutants. Yeah, eviscerating their opponents with like 2-handed scimitars. I don't think they would get into. I don't think she'd be into that.
Indeed.
Yeah. There's some stuff in there though. I'm looking through the entry that I made about it. Like, I invented the concept of, or at least I think I did, and something which has the body of a huge ogre and the head of an elephant. You could make that into.
Invented that.
Who?
Hinduism invented that, David.
Oh yeah.
Like, that guy already exists.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Yeah, yeah. But as a D&D monster,
right?
Would that be sacrilegious? Maybe that should be.
As long as it's clearly not Ganesh, you can.
Yeah.
You can fuck a thing and sing. This is. Yeah, have the characters comment. That's clearly not the Hindu god Ganesh, because obviously he's a very reasonable. My next question is.
Well, hang on. Just let me quickly recommend another book to you, which is quite good, which you wouldn't expect to be good, which is a fighting fantasy novel that you may have read. Actually, it's called The Trollsmith Wars, I think. Is that right? No, Trollsmith's that guy writes a blog. It's something like that. The Troll. What's it called again? The Troll Wars. The Troll. What was it called? The Trollsmith Wars. I can't remember. But it's a fighting fantasy novel anyway, from like, it must have been the late 80s. But I was heavily influenced by that. You know, like when you're a kid and you're writing something, and you kind of lift whole phrases from like books that you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the other like abortive novels that I wrote in those days was basically exactly the same plot as what's it called? Dragons of Autumn Twilight. The first Dragonlance book.
Those Dragonlance books speak to me mainly through that art style. It's Elmore Leonard.
Yeah.
They just fit that Elmore Leonard.
Not Elmore Leonard. Elmore Leonard's like a crime writer. Larry Elmore.
Yeah. That kind of dusky Americana.
Yeah.
Kind of like summery fantasy Renaissance fair vibe. It sounds like I've done Larry Elmore, but I'm not. He's a good artist, but they just have that hard American fantasy vibe.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. But I love that though. I know what you mean though. Like it's kind of. I know exactly what you mean. It's kind of really cheesy, but it's just like so nostalgic. It just really reminds me of like that era. Yeah, it's so like redolent of that particular time, isn't it? I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. I love that picture he did actually of is the character called Sturm in Dragonlance? No, the Knight of are they called the Knights of Solomnia or something like that? Or
I think so.
Knights of, and one of the characters is one of them, and he gets killed by the evil half sister of. Oh no, she's not his half sister because he's like shagging her, isn't he? The evil woman who Tanis half elf is in love with.
I don't remember that much detail. I'm sorry.
But anyway, it's a good picture though because it's her and she's got this like spear. I think it's her anyway. And he's like lying dead at her feet and he's got this massive like puncture wound in his chest. It's pretty good. Yeah.
All right, that gets us to our next question.
Yeah.
You have to assemble a super weapon of 5 D&D related objects in order to fully monetize Dungeons and Dragons. What are those 5 objects?
In order to what? Fully.
If they're fully monetized.
Fully monetize.
That's do you not know the statement from the Hasbro lady or the Mrs.
Oh yeah, she needs to like.
They're under monetized.
Yeah, right.
Got to fully monetize.
So it's my job to monetize it.
Yeah, and you can pick any 5 D&D related objects, real or unreal, personal or general.
Well, one of them would have to be the bag of holding. Yeah, one of them would have to be the bag of holding. Because then you can get anything out of it, you see. That's like when you wish for more wishes. It's like the same thing, isn't it? Then you would have a spell book containing the spell Fool's Gold. And you would have the deck of many things. Because you could kind of like you could use that to come up with like, well, many things, couldn't you, to money? You would have charm person. No, not charm person. Mass suggestion. That would be mass suggestion. So you could whisper to people, "You want a D&D insider account." Those aren't the D&D books you're looking for. What you're looking for is an app.
So bag of holding, deck of many things.
The spell book for Fool's Gold.
Spell. Okay, one more.
Yeah, mass suggestion and one more. That's a good one. Last one. Is there a spell that I'm thinking something like like magic jar. So you would like no, it wouldn't be magic jar actually. But like a spell that you could like it would involve people being sucked into like a vortex where they stay forever. So they could never escape. I tell you what, like something that would be like a key to the mazes in Sigil, in Planescape.
Mm-hmm.
So you could like push people through the portal into mazes and they can never escape. So they would just be in your walled garden of D&D material. They'd never be able to buy anything that's not from your walled garden. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I think I'm getting a perfect image of. I think you should be our new marketing director for Hasbro. You just bring them in with parasocial addiction and just trap them there forever, venting their dreams to you.
Yeah. The thing is, though, for all their sort of their evil corporateness, they seem to be making a success of it, don't they? The question is,
they've only made one. This has been their only massive miss.
Yeah, bigger, but I don't think that will really affect the bottom line.
The entirety of 5e, they've been doing really well. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think
it's previous ages of D&D where it's basically been a shit show from like a roller coaster?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But here's a question for you.
Oh.
Do you think that is due to their cleverness? Do you think that's a result of like their aptitude and the intrinsic brilliance of their edition of D&D? Or do you think it's pure coincidence based on the fact that like geeky things are now really popular?
I think you can't really strip them one from the other. 5e was unusually good and stable for an edition of D&D, I think. Though I think it's far from perfect, but it does what you need it to do. And at the same time, there has been a massive renaissance in nerdery and generalized autism. And like basically they managed not to fuck it up, and that still counts as a positive quality because, as we know from Warfare, from the main aspect in Warfare is just not making mistakes. Whoever makes most mistakes loses. So failing to make a mistake is still actually a success. So they have managed to ride the wave of parasocial D&D and nostalgia, desire for community and direct interaction up until this point without falling off or doing anything too mental in a way that would be surprising to almost any age or generation of D&D owners before now. Because up until now, it's basically been 5 minutes till the next meltdown or screw up.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, but it's still, I still don't really like
it. Back into an age of crisis, which will be fun to observe. So we don't know what they're going to do next. That's the question, isn't it? Are you excited for the new D&D movie?
No. No, I'm not excited, Patrick. When's it coming out?
I don't know, soonish, I think.
I think I saw the trailer for it and it kind of made me cringe. I'm sorry. I'm too.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, I think it's partly I am impossible to please when it comes to films in general. Like, I hate everything pretty much that I see. Well, certainly I hate everything sci-fi and like SF and fantasy, visual SF and fantasy. I hate it. Like, there's like a kind of a presumption of guilt if you're like a fantasy SF director, like a presumption that I will hate it, and you have to like rebut the presumption with accepting good.
Can you tell us briefly why?
Oh, just because it makes me. We could spend ages on this, but it is that kind of like. Well, I think probably the truth of the matter is it's like. I'm sure everyone watching this has a similar feeling sometimes. It's this feeling of like, I've done the hard yards being into these genres. And I don't like the idea of like Johnny come lately cinema goers just like coming along enjoying it when they haven't suffered in the same way. So that's part of it.
So it's just resentment again.
Mostly it's resentment. Yeah, a big part of it's resentment. But also, I think it's also just because, like, when you really like something a lot, you have an image of it in your head, and I don't like it being contradicted. So, like, The Lord of the Rings is like an obvious example of that. Like, you know, because I really love those books from like such a young age, and I have an idea in my head of like what they look like and what the characters look like and everything else. And the Peter Jackson version of them just doesn't conform to that, so it just doesn't sit right with me. So there's that element of it. I think it's partly because Hollywood films are always just inherently a bit cringy, especially now that they're all like blockbustery. Like, you don't get like Hollywood movies used to be. Some of them used to be really interesting. You know, you would get like what am I thinking of? Like, think of an example. Like Chinatown or The Exorcist or John Carpenter's The Thing. You know, like, if it was that Hollywood movie, maybe not actually. But anyway, you know, you get my point. There used to be like these really kind of gritty, like turd movies that like they're really rare now. And instead, you just get these turgid documentaries, blockbusters, which are kind of. I think what annoys me about them is that they're always kind of like slightly knowing, like they're always kind of like slightly nudge, nudge, wink, wink to the audience. Do you understand what I mean by that? Like, they keep constantly reminding you that you are watching a film. Like, it's very hard to get immersed in them completely because there are all these like in jokes and kind of her moments, you know, as if you're kind of sitting next to the director and he's kind of like constantly sort of nudging you and saying, "Oh, do you get what I did there? That's funny, isn't it?" Do you understand what I mean by that? There seems to be this kind of like, they're very arch, I suppose is the best way of putting it. There's an archness to them. Yeah. And it's like that. I'm sure the D&D film's going to be like that because it's got these kind of.
It will very much. It's already, you can smell it on it from the trailers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if I want to watch a fantasy film, I want to feel as though I'm being taken away completely and immersed in that. Like Guillermo del Toro can do that, right? It's a great shame that he didn't do The Hobbit, because I feel like he would have done that with The Hobbit. Like there are certain directors out there who can do that, but not the person who's going to be directing D&D, the movie. Definitely not. Like I hate the new Star Trek films for that reason as well, and the new Star Wars ones. They're all like that. They've all got that like knowing tone to them. That just sends shivers down my spine. I can't really put it into words. I just hate it. I just know that I hate it, and I know that you're the same. I'm 99% sure that you're the same.
I will still watch crap actually and half enjoy it, but I don't really go to the movies anymore. I'm streaming now. The streaming has its own tonality of mediocrity, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I don't like Netflix stuff really. I haven't watched The Wheel of Time. I heard it's not very good, but I never really liked that.
I did find The Wheel of Time because I went in expecting it to be trash, and it was, but it was like everything that I don't like about modern fantasy productions was kind of already an aspect of The Wheel of Time, like Troggoths.
Yeah.
But like a vague Dark Lord plot.
And
Power of friendship, and we need a sequel. Oh, this is going to make money, and it turns out there's more things for us to do. And like all of that shit is already like it's already that. So there's no conflict between what the system needs it to be and what it is. It's like the perfect synergy of just like let's crash and roll with it. And so I didn't like it, but it didn't offend me because they weren't destroying anything I cared about. It wasn't like you really let me down this time. I was like, it's like a slightly dense child who performs well on a test. And you're like, oh, done well.
Yeah. Okay. I think also one thing is the aesthetic as well. I think I wrote a blog post about this, but like my ideal fantasy movie would be animated, like because I'd much rather watch like a really interesting, like expressively drawn, beautiful animation than I would CGI special effects, because they still, to me, never quite look right. It always looks slightly jarring when real people are interacting with them. I'd much rather the whole thing was just done in a fantastical style, in an animated way. That would be way more appealing to me. So like I love Miyazaki's like fantasies because the aesthetic is kind of integrated, isn't it? There's nothing jarring about it because it's all in the same mode. It's all hand-drawn animation, or more or less. And actually, when there are sort of like computer-assisted elements of Miyazaki's films, that's when you kind of notice the joints a little bit and think, hang on, that looks a bit fishy. So yeah, I'd much rather they had just a kind of unified aesthetic that was based in animation rather than real people.
A solid answer, David. Thank you. Do what? Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about music because you usually have pretty good taste in classical music, or we could go into prog jazz, which I know you're into. But we need more musical references in the OSR. Can you give us a few for you, or just for the families and people watching at home?
Can I give what?
Give us some classical musical, or progressive jazz references, because I know you have some niche tastes.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah. So, I've got a big. I'm actually working on a Nu-Yoon-Suin playlist.
Oh.
On Spotify that I'm going to put out there. So there'll be more of it in that. So I don't want to give the game away entirely on that because I was going to do that sort of like the last couple of days before the Kickstarter gets funded.
Well, can you give us some? Is it all going to be classical, or will there be some weird?
There's a mixture. There's some modern weird like classical stuff on there, like some atonal stuff. Have you heard of a guy called Takemitsu? What's his name again? I'll look him up. Hang on. He's Japanese, as you can obviously expect from the name. And he did these. He's most famous for doing the soundtrack to, Lan, the Akira Kurosawa film.
Oh yes, I know that. Yeah.
His name's Takemitsu Toru. Toru is his first name. But some of his stuff on there, his stuff's really kind of like eerie and creepy and weird. It's really good. There's a bit of Bartók, there's a bit of Stravinsky, sort of like modernist composers, I guess you would say. Weirdly, Russian composers can often sound, quote unquote, kind of like stereotypically Asian because during the sort of, I mean, Russia's obviously like an Asian country, even more than it's a European country, but like in the 19th century, there's a big move by Russian composers to create like a distinctive Russian style of conducting or composition that wouldn't sound like Western European style. So it kind of like, if you want classical music that sounds a bit kind of like exotic and foreign, then it's often like Russian composers are pretty good. Like Borodin stuff like that as well. Borodin's pretty good. Prog jazz. I know why you're asking about that question, so I should probably explain. Well, you can explain if you want to. I don't know.
I think, basically, David, we were going out for a drink with David and picked me up in his car, and he turned to me and said, "Why don't you like progressive jazz?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he started putting on some of the strangest music I'd ever heard. I was really vibing pretty hard to it as we were driving through the Wirral. And it's like, this is, in a way, a surprise, but not a shock. And like, it fits somehow. I don't know why.
Well, there's the reason why you're omitting the interesting bit about it, which is all like, it's all written by Scientologists. So like, it has to be Scientologist progressive jazz. There's quite a famous, people who know jazz will have heard of him, Chick Corea. He's a very famous jazz pianist, but he became a Scientologist and he started composing like really weird, like like a lot of the Scientologists. Well, Scientology has like an SF vibe to it, doesn't it? Because of L. Ron Hubbard. So like everything involving Scientology. Should we be talking about Scientology on the internet? I feel like that means we're going to get like assassinated or something.
So we're fine. It'll be fine.
So I'm not criticizing Scientology when I say that a lot of it has like a science fictional vibe, or like a Navy vibe, because he was in the Navy, wasn't he? L. Ron Hubbard, and he liked ships a lot. He used to sail around on a boat, didn't he?
Looking for treasure.
Yeah,
like character.
Yeah. But they've got and founded his own religion, like a lot of D&D characters. Like a lot of D&D characters. So Chick Corea was a jazz pianist, and he founded a very famous jazz fusion group called Return to Forever. And I think Return to Forever is itself a Scientology reference, because they believe in living forever, don't they? You can get to live forever, I think, I think you get reincarnated normally, but there is a point that you reach where you can become like a sort of immortal soul and transcend the requirement to get reincarnated, I think. Is that right? Does that sound right to you?
I don't know, but I'll assume that you're right.
Yeah, well, anyway. So, yeah, Return to Forever were like really... again, it's kind of like this vibe that I find really appealing. It's sort of like... It's like the imaginary soundtrack to sort of like a late 1970s low-budget science fiction movie or fantasy movie. Like kind of like... Well, you can sort of imagine the vibe I'm talking about, where it's sort of like... sort of sets that sort of are slightly... like they shake when the doors open and close and stuff, and like... all the women are in like bikinis, and all the men are like running around like bare-chested with like medallions and shooting ray guns at each other. Do you know what I mean? Like there's just that kind of like that aesthetic. Like I love that look, even though it's like so awful and corny. A bit like Buck Rogers, actually, the Buck Rogers film. Right. With the Queen soundtrack. A bit like that.
That was Flash Gordon, but yeah, I get you.
Yeah, Flash Gordon. Sorry, yeah, Buck Rogers. You know what I mean? Yeah, Flash Gordon. Or although actually, wasn't there a book? No, what's that?
There was 1970 Buck Rogers series with everyone in very sheer velour, which gave me prepubescent twinges when.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And Battlestar Galactica was the one I'm thinking of, the original Battlestar Galactica.
So much
that kind of, and it had this kind of like beep 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 beep, beep sort of synthesizer music in the background. That's kind of what it always kind of like. That's the. And that was like what John Williams was reacting against, wasn't it, in Star Wars when he made it like orchestral, because he wanted to sort of step away from that like beepy boop sort of music. But I really liked that kind of like beepy boop sort of music. And there's an album in particular by Return to Forever, which is called Romantic Warrior. And like I so want to just make a setting like based on imagining that soundtrack sort of like made concrete reality. It'd be great. There's a track on it called The Sorceress, which is like this sort of like funky bass track, and it just, you can just imagine this like sexy sorceress kind of like in her laboratory, kind of like mixing potions and stuff. It's just like so perfect for it. It's great, and it's got this kind of what's the other one called? One of the tracks is called something like The Battle Between the Jester and the Warlock, or something like that. I can't remember the exact title now, but like. It's got like, they're all like, all the tracks are called stuff like that. So yeah, that's a long way of saying I kind of really love that sort of vibe in a strange sort of way. It's a bit like Larry Elmore's art. It's old and corny, but there's just something like really moody and atmospheric about it that I really like. So I'd love to make a setting that's kind of like got that sort of vibe to it.
What I'm getting from this interview, David, is that you missed the 70s, a decade you weren't there for, but you're.
I know, I wasn't even born. I'm nostalgic for a period. Yeah, I know. I'm nostalgic for a period before I was born. Like H.P. Lovecraft, like nostalgic for like the 19th century. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But not like him in that I'm not a horrible racist weirdo.
With that said, keep in mind, I'm going to ask you another question I have, which is, how much like Alan Partridge are you now on a scale of 1 to 10?
Probably about 7 or 8.
We were talking previously, and we mentioned that most Anglo men or Anglo nerds eventually, as they age, get into the Partridge zone, where we all just basically synergize with Alan Partridge and become.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think the main difference is that Alan Partridge, the difference with him is that he tries like to be. Like he tries to remain sort of cool, doesn't he, and cutting edge. Like there's like he's still. Well, no, actually, that's not true, is it? I haven't said that. I was going to say because he tries to be into new music, but he doesn't, does he? He's sort of like wedded to like his era of music, isn't he? Sort of like cheesy ballads. Yeah, maybe I'm more like a 9 then. But actually, I think, have you ever seen Saxondale? Speaking of like
a while ago, yeah.
Because of the two, I think I might be straying more into like Saxondale territory. Like I've started thinking seriously about like getting a motorbike. Or like a muscle car, like a Ford Mustang.
Not a Trans Am van or something.
Yeah, something like that. Just like some sort of midlife crisis kind of like statement vehicle.
You can drive out to a field with a bunch of other middle-aged men and look at each other's cars.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, he's got like a pet falcon, like he's like falconry. It's like, I could totally imagine getting into that.
There's a falcon near me. I see him when I go on my bike sometimes, because I saw this guy there's like a country lane, and I don't see this white van parked up in the middle of this lane where no one goes. I think, something's going on there. And I saw him with a falcon. I was like, that's a nice surprise. It's less than I thought it was, but you've got to be careful around him because he was just walking along with this falcon on the arm.
Yeah. You would be scared of it flying away, wouldn't you? It must be attached to him, presumably. When I was a kid, there was this guy who lived. Have I told you this story? Well, actually, I wouldn't have told the listeners, so never mind. You might have heard it before. It's like not. So, by my local park where I grew up, there was this huge house, like a huge mansion, right by the entrance. And everybody knew who the person who owned it was, like a drug dealer. Like he was kind of like a sort of relatively significant, like drug lord, in Liverpool, who'd bought his house in Wallasey's, kind of like to live a genteel sort of life. But he obviously got his money from like, illegitimate sources. Let's put it that way. And there are always these like mysterious BMWs and Mercedes like parked outside his house, or like, and And he had these Rottweilers. He had about 5 Rottweilers. He used to like, jump up on the wall and like bark at you as you walk past. But he also had this pet parrot in a huge cage in his garden. And it was just like scream like hello at you or whatever as you were walking past. But one day I came to the park with, I think it was with my dad, and we just walked in and the parrot had escaped and had flown into the park and was up in one of these like big tall beech trees. And like him and all his like gangster cronies, there was like him, like a dozen of like, sort of like his flunkies. And they were all trying to get this parrot, and they had these like ladders that they were bringing to like put up against the tree, and they were trying to like coax this parrot back down. And it was kind of like, I don't know, it just sort of ruined the whole like gangster aesthetic, like trying to get this parrot. A runaway parrot.
Curtis Warren.
Hey?
Was it Curtis Warren?
It might have been.
No, he had a house up near New Brighton, and he lived at the end of like a long sea road. So the road just came off the main road, went to the sea, and he was right at the end. And apparently it was so he could see the cops coming. If there was only one way to get there.
Yeah, I know exactly the type of house. Yeah. That wouldn't be interesting to anyone who's not been to Wallasey, but like, I can totally. I know exactly the houses. Yeah. We should say Curtis Warren was like an infamous Liverpool sort of drug baron, wasn't he? Yeah.
All right, David. That I think takes us roughly to an hour.
It does.
Do you have any exciting statements to make to round out our interview?
Other than it's your duty to give me as much money as you can possibly afford for the Kickstarter. No, other than just like, Nu-Yoon-Suin second edition will be good. It will be worth having. It's new stuff. It's not just a rehash. Like there's new stuff added to it that will be good and which will excite and enthrall you. And more importantly than that, it's going to be a limited run. So this isn't going to be like print on demand. I'm going to do a run of probably 2,500, maybe 3,000 max. After that, it won't happen anymore. There'll be no more of them, I don't think. So, yeah. Smoke them while you got them.
All right.
Get them while they're hot.
Goodbye, everybody.